So one example of an introduction, which I wrote when first year for a paper at Cambridge, was for the question title, "The West did not triumph in a Cold War. The Eastern Bloc needlessly surrendered." And this was a 2016 question, and I think my supervisor at the time awarded me first for this. It's a supervision essay. And we'll read out bits of my introduction, which she particularly liked and I think is useful. It's quite short as an introduction. Although for the John Locke competition, it's much better, I think, to have shorter paragraphs. We'll talk a bit more about that later. But I wanted to show this so you can see how you can analyze a question. So for example, it's almost as if you're analyzing poetry. So I was saying that the binaries of victory and loss, triumph and surrender, Western needs that inherent in its title, of limited use and understanding the Cold War, ending of the Cold War. And you could say, actually a question simplifies what is in fact a very complex event. And it's the same for, this question of the John Locke competition, because it supposes some kind of regional homogeneity, a regional sameness, if you will, when, as you've seen in the last video, economic growth varied so much between different phases. So I've defined a time period, so from 1985 to 1991, and I've justified why I've set up these time periods. So with this question, you need to justify the beginning of when you're going to look at rare economic growth and the ending of when you're going to look at this. So for some people watching this video, economic growth could be an ongoing process, especially if you're interested in development economics or development history, looking at the global south. For others writing this question, you might want to end it, for example, in the late 19th century or the early 20th century. It's completely up to you. It's just that you need a justification for why you're doing this. And it doesn't have to be very long. It could just be one sentence. At the same time, there's also concepts like the West, and you should always be careful of these kinds of broad concepts, which makes people think, oh, every single country was doing things in the same way. This is not, of course, not the case. And as we've seen, the Industrial Revolution economic growth first began in England, in the UK. So that's very different from saying Europe as a whole. You can very precisely say one country. And be careful though of completely criticizing the question. Remember that academics have set the question, so they think there is some use, at least, in the question that they're asking and the way that they frame the question. So don't be overly critical, and that's some advice that I would give more generally as well. And you can also see, for example, I've kind of tried to credit it by saying this way of thinking can be a useful way of assessing the remarkably rapid turn of events from 1985 to 1991. So let's see how this can fit and be useful for our question itself.